By the nature of what Deep Green is working on, the initiatives and the transformative impact that your company could have in the coming years, it really crosses all different facets of the ecosystem, the operators. It impacts the technology companies, the facility companies, for sure, construction, real estate, how capital is deployed. Given that, when you're approached by people that are very, very early on in their career, perhaps they're still in university, figuring out what they want to do in their first job to graduate. Imagine a teenage son or daughter of a neighbor or friend or family member approached you and said, Mark, I've heard that there's a lot of great opportunities in digital infrastructure. You seem to have a pretty good pulse on what's going on in the space. What would you advise to someone that's interested in this kind of career, but not so much on the technical side? They don't see themselves as a developer or engineer. They're interested more in client-facing roles. What kind of advice would you offer to someone at that stage in their career?
Yeah, I've always very hesitant about offering advice, but as we talked about, certainly my experience in it, in the data center industry specifically, I think it is no different from other businesses that we've invested in other sectors, which is I'm fond of sort of saying it's very difficult to stay in your lane now. So I think a lot of people coming into any industry, so take autos, for example, it was really instructive to see the head of Ford come out, wherever it was, kind of 6 months ago, and say, we're actually a software business. And if you're an autos manufacturer, you're now a software business. You're now you're now an energy business as well. You're an entertainment business. And I think that's the same with the data center industry, but I think it's perhaps even more acute because it's a relatively new sector. And there are so many aspects of the industry which are coming together and changing the nature of what the data center industry does. And we talk about the C's of change, so that there are kind of at least 6 C's around that kind of are changing the industry, and those are, you've got to understand energy trading, you've got to understand the ESG impact and the kind of circular economy of it. You've got to understand sort of energy generation. Then you've got to understand the existing real estate version of the business. But then on top of that, you've got to understand what's going on in the software layers, because as we talked about 15 years ago, some data centers were only kind of utilized 10% of the time. But what's happening in the software layers in terms of this migration from kind of mainframes all the way through kind of virtualization and then Kubernetes, and now we've got WebAssembly and Rust and all these zero trust protocols. This means that the software layers are going to fundamentally change the asset utilization of the real estate, because instead of a data center being on 20-30% of the time, it's going to be on 99% of the time, even non-AI workloads. So I think anyone coming in, the joy of working in the world as we know it is that it's no longer, you get into the data center industry and you kind of understand it as a real estate game, or it's so much more. And I think for us oldies, I'm fortunate enough to have turned 50 this week. It's for somebody new coming into any industry. Again, everyone is always so anchored in their own reality of a business. And I've invested in lots of different sectors in my career, and it never fails to amaze me how those who've been working on an industry will tell you and will be so fixed mindset. So I often say it to youngsters coming into any industry: your ignorance is a superpower, because you can just ask dumb questions. You can just ask, and often those dumb questions are things that a traditional industry doesn't really want to acknowledge. So, for example, in the autos industry, 5 years ago, when we were set up an EV subscription business, we would ask people, well, how do people want to buy a car? And everyone would go, sit down, I'm going to tell you. It's a 5-step process. They want to come into a car dealership, then they want a cup of coffee, then their kids want to play in the play area, and then they don't. They want to buy it online, And so as a young person, you often sort of defer to authority or age, or somebody with some grey in their hair. Actually, don't respect no authority. You can say it in a respectful way, but I think it's very dangerous to respect any orthodoxy.
Yeah, so for sure, it's very possible that formal higher education is giving people the exact opposite of what they need to be successful in this space. One is because if they're talking about digital infrastructure at all, it's probably from 10 years ago. If they're talking about ESG, it's probably from 5 years ago. And most importantly, they're told to never disagree with the professor
Yes,
or their
quite
employer.
exactly. Yes, 100%. And if you know, it takes a lot. It's really difficult on the ego and the psyche when somebody tells you you're wrong all the time. I mean, as an entrepreneur, there's a lovely podcast, Stephen Bartlett, one of the guys who set up Netflix, and it's just there are no good ideas as an entrepreneur. There are only bad ideas. It's just how you shuffle yourself to a less bad idea and eventually to a good idea. So that's psychologically hard, and actually a lot of the time everyone in the world of work now is we have to be entrepreneurs. The world's changing fast enough that most of us have no choice.
Yeah. So that's fantastic advice for someone potentially in their 20s, early stage of their career, on how to approach these opportunities, and most of all, the appreciation of the multidisciplinary need to really be the Renaissance person that's understands a lot about a lot of different areas to be effective, and the importance of being able to motivate change.